Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Marine Depot.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the first international edition of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host Keith Berkelhamer, and yeah, today I have the pleasure of welcoming Julian Baggio and Ehsan Dashti from TRITON. And these guys are down under. It's actually today in Australia. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, Friday in Australia. Hey guys, welcome to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
So there were some technical challenges for me in terms of getting two guests on at once. These guys are in Australia. It's in an international show right here. So if there are any issues with the audio, if you guys can't hear one of us, please let me know in the chat. But geez, so we got a few folks that are tuning in right now. I see Scotty Damron. Thanks, Scotty, for tuning in again. Macy's daddy, I see, is back. Algae Warrior, Wade Riles, and Macy's daddy says hi. Julian and Ehsan. So, well, let me first start to kind of give the folks that don't know you guys a little background in terms of who you guys are and what you do for TRITON. Ehsan is the founder and owner of TRITON, and the company is called TRITON Applied Reef Bioscience. He established the company back in 2008 in Dusseldorf, Germany. TRITON quickly became the industry leader in water biochemistry by developing several groundbreaking innovations and by bringing an unprecedented level of transparency to the industry and the aquarist. Ehsan has presented talks at numerous international conferences around the world, like the IAC, MACA, PET South America, PET Asia, EU, AC, and MACNA. There's a lot of acronyms there. Yeah. Julian has been an aquarist for almost 40 years, is the head of the science division at TRITON, and has a degree in marine science at the University of Queensland. He has been employed as a coral and fish collections diver, as well as a senior manager of export sales and freight logistics for Australia's largest fish and coral wholesaler. Boy, I bet, Julian, you've handled and seen a lot of eye candy in your time with that job, right?
Definitely, Keith. It was the best part of it.
Yeah. Julian has also presented at numerous international conferences around the world, including IAC, RAW, and MACNA. And again, guys, thanks for taking the time. I know you're real busy down there, but we're really psyched to have you. Before we start chatting with you guys, though, I want to thank the show's sponsor, Marine Depot. I really appreciate Marine Depot being a supporter of the show, and I appreciate the support from you folks, the viewers out there. So please spread the word about the show. Hit that like button so more people can find this live stream. And now that we've taken care of some business, let's talk with Ehsan and Julian. And before we start with these guys, I encourage you folks, and these guys are actually asked me to say this before the show. I encourage you folks to ask the tough questions. So ask these guys, fire away, ask the tough questions, the awkward questions, try to stump them, right? And we want this to be very interactive. So with that, guys, I provided a little information about your backgrounds, but can you give us really the backstory in terms of how you both started out in the reef keeping world and how you ended up at TRITON?
Oh yeah, that's Julian's. Start with your story first.
All right, mate. I'll kick it off. I guess as you explained, I was working for the largest exporter over those 20 years. Started straight from university, and was fortunate enough to score a job with Cairns Marine. And at the start of that, I was employed as a diver, so living out 3 or 4 days, 5 days on the reef, hand collecting fish, coral, caring for them on the boat, and then bring them back to the facility where we would obviously stage them and prepare them for transport to retail shops around Australia, as well as the big importers through LA, throughout America and other countries, Europe, almost every continent on the planet. So a lot of challenges, a lot of logistics there. As you said, it was probably the most enjoyable part was the amazing diversity of coral species that I came in contact with, selecting orders, aquapora, as that become kind of a thing, I guess, that when I first started at Cairns Marine, there wasn't really that demand for the high-end aquaporas. It was a totally different industry back then. And seeing the evolution of the hobby and the industry as technology in that developed was probably a very interesting part of being a part of that export facility. I was fortunate enough to meet Ehsan. We met in MACNA, Denver, Colorado. He was bringing ICP to America and presenting a talk about the power of the ICP testing. It was new to me. I'd never heard of an ICP machine, and he was very excited to explain to my boss and I, Lyle, about ICP and what it can do for us, and our looking into our water chemistry and having more control. So I was very excited to sit in on his talk. I was doing a talk on sustainable collection of animals within Australia. All the collectors in Australia work under very strict management. So I was presenting about, supplying the best fish and coral, and Ehsan was talking about providing the best water chemistry. So it was a very good match between us. We struck up a friendship, and that maintained that friendship for all the years later. Into the end, where I was fortunate enough to, I'd left Cairns Marine and was working for another company, a freight company, and then Ehsan's drew me back, lured me back to the hobby and the industry.
Sucked you back in.
With the opportunity. Yeah. So I'm really happy because all those years of knowledge and contacts and all the things I loved, which, it was my hobby, as I said, since I was 5 years old. It's to be back in working within the hobby that I love as an aquarist and also then teaching people, learning about water chemistry. It's definitely back where I belong. So that's pretty much me.
Ehsan?
Yeah. For me, I founded TRITON, right? So this is the way I got to it. I just founded it. But I was a hobbyist since I'm 12, right? Because there was a shop next door to my school, and it had it was one of the shops in the city that had marine fish. So I think one of 4. And I was always in there, while the other cool guys did some other stuff. I was in that shop and checking out fish and live rock. Actually, there was not one coral, maybe a softie, but nothing else. I just got very, it was a hobby thing. So it was very much, me in that shop for a year or so, maybe from 11 to 12, and then my dad decided to get me a aquarium at home, and that's the way I started the hobby. And my dad is a chemist. My mom is a pharmacist, so it was kind of that side of things that was interesting for me too, because they can't answer me the questions that I had back then. It was a time where skimmers was still air driven, like, so they hadn't had pumps and stuff. So it's pretty early, and we hadn't had a sump. So it was always like, it was all the beginning, which really was a crazy good time, and that's the way it kind of developed, I think, and then it went just that way until it reached a point where I was studying chemistry, and I realized that there's a lot of things missing in our industry. So it was my dad actually said it's not an industry, so or we can talk about it later. But yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. But there was a clicking point, a point where I said, I think that's the way to go, where people started to produce products for our hobby, right? So really for it. So, and I mean pumps and lights and stuff like that. So before that, like I say, there was air-driven skimmers, and a skimmer was maybe the first thing that was maybe made just for marine aquariums. But then there was pumps we used from like industry pumps back then, like big, bulky pumps that had just a PVC mount on top, so it's not corroding. But the rest of the pump was all industry stuff. And at one point, the company starting to adapt just for marine aquariums, and they built pumps that are just made for marine aquariums. And that was actually the case with lamps and stuff too. And everybody in the hobby got more successful. And I think back then, because I was a bit of the chemistry guy, I saw that there's a need for doing the same thing to the hobby in a chemical way. And that's why I started TRITON. Right, so the TRITON, that's kind of the reason why I started TRITON, because I saw that need for a bit of science, for a bit of chemistry made for the aquarium, not whatever is out there, just grab it and try it. And that was the way when I founded TRITON. There's a very hobby reason for it, which I think we'll elaborate later. But yeah, that's the way I founded it with my dad and my mom back then. Yeah.
So Ehsan, can you just give the folks that are not intimately familiar with TRITON in terms of what the company is all about, and kind of explain just briefly the products and services that you guys offer?
Yes, so we are a company that wanted to make reef keeping modern and more transparent. That's actually pretty much what we do, right? So especially for the biochemical side. So we're not the people that build lamps. We've done that. We had a lamp, Lani, and we sold the brand to another manufacturer. But we just started out because the industry is not big, so we need to kind of focus on something, and that's chemistry, right? That's our strength. We do a lot of lab testing. We have 4 laboratories around the world. One of them is in Los Angeles. UK is London. We have one close to Frankfurt in Germany, and one here. And what we do is we try to demystify all the chemical processes in an aquarium, and then produce products that people can use at home, right? So what we started with was lab testing. We started to see what's in people's aquarium, and we made it possible for them. That's what we call transparency, possible for them to see what's in their own aquarium, what's in their products, what really is the reason why they fail, because before we started, there was just maybe 6.5 to 7% of visibility of your water chemistry. So when you do all your home test kits, you're actually missing 94% of your water, right? So there's a lot of little things that can harm your corals. A lot of, there was a lot of mistakes, unintended mistakes people did. Things that anecdotally we try to avoid, but there was no possibility to actually find out if we did a good job with avoiding them. So we hadn't had a check like, hey, do I touch my tank too often, right? Do I put my hand in there too often? Yes or no? And there was nothing saying to you, yes or no, I did it too often, and this is why my corals died. And obviously there is really a reason if you use hand cream, and like builders and women tend to have, for example, a lot of zinc in their aquarium because they use hand cream with zinc and then they touch the aquarium. And we found out over years of data collecting that this is a possibility, right? Not counting for everybody, but
You
know,
learn
and
something
now
new
you can
every
just
day, I'll
kind of
tell
see-
you. You learn something new every day. I had no idea.
Yeah, hey, it's funny, but we learn something new every day, Julian and me. Now, with 4 machines around the world, we actually, at the point where we can talk about that later, like I say, but it's crazy in the moment. So, yeah, it's we did this, and we still keep doing it, and it made people very much around the world very successful because they can see what they do, they can control things on their own, and it's not just going somewhere in a forum or somewhere and ask, hey, is this product good for my tank, or is this causing my corals to die? That's a question that has been out there for so long, and then there were chemical discussions about ionic disbalance, about products you should use or not, and I mean millions of things. You can just go back in time and check out the forums in America, because I was there. I was checking out the forums in America, and I just wanted a solution and a way out of this permanent questioning and answers. And that's why my dad and me back then said, there is no way out. We need to have something that can test for it. We need to have a laboratory that is going that way. And we started doing that 2008, right? So that caused, but afterwards, a lot of other things to happen. So just, it's not ending. Science is always open in one door, and then you stand there and have 2 doors, right? So then we're faced with a lot of things that doesn't work, and we were faced with a problem where we can't blame anybody because we're not the company that do that. Like, you can't say, hey, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad and this is bad. So we started to create our own chemicals out of the ability to, and our own method that people can switch to get everything right. I mean, this is the best way to do it because you're not kind of aggressive into the market. And that also gave a lot of other companies the possibility over time to adapt to that modern way of reef keeping, which they did. I mean, we're looking at, I think 16 ICP testing machines around the world now, right? So, which is, again, it's the right way, because you the goal wasn't, be the sole, modern super reef keeping company. It was more help the people to get more successful and grow the hobby entirely. And that's what happened, to be honest. Like, people are more successful, way more successful with SPS than we have been before, because they have more control, because there's more knowledge out there. Even the anecdotal knowledge is better than before. I'll remember times where people said potassium is super dangerous in Europe, while in America nobody cared. And that was what we saw on the tests, the super high potassium in America and super low in Europe in the beginning. And it's just like, that was just, it doesn't matter high or low, kind of, but that was, a knowledge that actually, even the anecdotal knowledge was kind of misleading somehow. Nobody knows what's right. And it came up over the testing time. And so we really try, what we stick to is scientific working, right? So we try to get the industry more scientific, not from the way that you should write papers. We're not the NASA, we're not trying to, go to moon, but it's a mindset. It's a mindset, how you kind of see your hobby and how you run your aquarium. That's, most of our customers actually say that it is a mindset more than it's a product, right? So we try to understand what we do. We try not to put everything in there, and we actually try to reduce the amount of fancy marketing very much, which is, in my opinion, still the main driver of failure in our hobby, because over marketing things cause people to be super excited and put stuff in their aquarium, and they kind of get unaware what they're doing. And that's exactly what is the opposite of TRITON, if you want to kind of explain that.
So, guys, we have we got a few questions in the chat, but maybe before we do that, you guys also provided some video of some TRITON tanks that I believe are examples of tanks that were on the TRITON method. So maybe if I show that video, and maybe I can mute the sound on that, and maybe it would be awesome if you guys could just kind of explain what that TRITON method is in terms of the full TRITON method for a tank. So let me run this. And I'm muting the sound on it, so folks will see the video come up in about 20 seconds because we've got a bit of a lag here with the live feed in YouTube. But yeah, why don't you guys go ahead and kind of explain what the full TRITON method is for folks out there?
Yes, I think I'll do that maybe easiest. So the TRITON method is actually two things. It's the way you run your aquarium. Maybe the easiest way and the most successful, because you kind of need to look at the end result. The TRITON method is pretty much what people run the tank like in the past for soft corals, but it's having the ability to go really high end, which you will see on, I don't know which video you're showing right now, but both of them. One is my tank, my aquarium, back then in Dusseldorf, and one is one of our recent customers that, you know, was very happy about it and got me a really nice present for my birthday. Anyway, so the thing is that the TRITON method is just a complete solution to run your aquarium. That's what it is. So you're not relying on anything else. We do that because you can't do any mistakes if you do it like that. So you're not, you know, you don't need to choose any other products or whatever. There are recommendations for skimmers. It's a fixed filter with algae, like a biological system. Let's say that. And you have an algae bed, and then you run our elements that actually support the algae and support your filter. That's the main thing to it. It's very easy to use. Actually, you just go by protocol, and you obviously will have a very stable system that works for a long time, and have very crazy high-end results if you want to, right? If not, it's still okay to kind of move away from it a bit. But the end result, that high-end result that you will see, corals growing on the rock 1 meter, you know, I mean, my clam was 1 meter big, right? There's a lot of videos of that clam out there, in the middle of, you know, Germany with no sea around, and it spawned in there twice.
Wow.
So it just yeah, it is a very natural aquarium, like a very natural type. There's a lot of fish that are kept. They are very hard to keep for ages, you know, because of the food sources that you kind of produce for them. And all the big 1 meter corals was alive from below, like without light, right? So they growed on the rock, and they still kept growing because you had enough food to support the lower structure. You don't even see that sometimes in the sea out here in the Barrier Reef. So some of the corals out here, they die from below, you know, but in that tank, it wasn't the case. Maybe you see that on the video. But anyway, that's the one side. So for the customers, it's kind of the easiest way to get successful. And for us, it's the best way to support them because we know this system. It's a bit of a cage, to be honest. You need to do a lot of things. That's kind of looking like at first sight, you would say, that's a bit of caging me in, you know, like I need to have algae. Maybe I don't want that, but it's all having a reason. Because the main problem is that if you go too chaotic, then nobody really can help you because you're ending up in so many variables that even a support, even me being a really good reef keeper for years, can't help you. It's more of a guesswork. I'll just say, okay, I have maybe seen this, maybe you change that, right? But with TRITON support is a bit different because you come to us in a full TRITON method. We exactly know what you're doing, right? So if you say, I have cyanobacteria, we know what's the most likely case. So we can help like right away and say, yeah, mate, you don't have enough live rock. And mostly it's like, oh yeah, where do you know that? I don't have any live rock. It's a yeah, we know that because that's the cause over 12 years, 13 years, we found out that this is mostly the cause for having a cyanobacteria in a Triton system, not
So
everywhere.
if somebody develops cyanobacteria in a Triton system, you guys can kind of come up with a roadmap in terms of how to take care of that cyano?
Exactly.
I'll just add to that, Ehsan. Just yeah, like you said, it sometimes gets described as a bit of a cage, but I kind of flip that and say it's a safety net. That, you know, if the sharks are outside circling, you want to be in a cage because it's safer. And that's where, I mean, I look after the support desk with Ehsan, and like he said, when people contact us, we have the ability to, you know, we ask the question, are you running a Triton system, Triton method? As a scientist, we always talk about knocking out the variables. You know, you got to try and take all the variables out of the equation, and then you've got the ability to kind of bore down to the root issue. So if we already know, based on them using the Triton method, the componentry of their filtration, their export systems, how they're removing nutrients, that is a massive step forward. You know, we leap to pretty much the core issues, and we can identify those very quickly.
Yeah, we even know what they add. We know that they add in our product, so we know what we add. You know, trace element wise, whatever. So that's if you want to. Sorry, Keith.
I was just going to ask. You know, that's interesting. What I mean, does that is that the same case for, like, if somebody develops dinos or gets bryopsis? Can you guys kind of come up with a similar type of plan to help folks with those?
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. And even look, even if you're using the wrong pump, we can tell you sometimes. People are amazed, you know, when we come up saying, "Hey, you're using this pump because we saw tungsten in your aquarium," and they say, "Where do you know which pump I'm using?" Right? Because data creates knowledge, right? That data we have tested now over 500,000 tests of aquariums in that time, right? This is a massive database, and we can't. There's so much data that we can't really, honestly, not know everything out of it. There's so much in it still. But yes, that data helps us to, you know, get down to the root of a lot of problems people have and find solutions much quicker than it was possible before. That's what I've talked, actually, why I founded this company, right? That's from the side of the aquarist, right? So from our customer side is the easiness and the ability to help, which is superior, like, compared to anything else is out there. But and for that reason, because it's so old and there's so much data. But for us, is actually that's the main thing we can do science on, because you need to understand one thing. When I first time tested vanadium, nobody know what it's good for, what it does, it is needed or not. There was no knowledge about it, nothing, right? So there's just maybe published somewhere how much vanadium you can approximately expect in seawater, but nothing else, right? Or chromium, cobalt, whatever. And there is a bit of, you know, write-ups about something that they could do, and it's mostly about coral skeleton or, you know, out in the sea, but nothing for aquariums. Again, it wasn't for aquariums, right? So what we did with the Triton method was solving one big problem. Is if we test aquariums around the world, millions, doesn't matter, and they're all chaotic and they don't follow a framework, then we can't extract information. It's a bit like you have two cars and you try to find the best fuel, and you have two different cars and you fuel them up with the same fuel and you drive them. That's actually not saying anything about the fuel, because the cars are so different. If you run exactly the same car and two different fuels, it's saying a lot about the fuel you used, because the car that is driving faster or whatever is actually just different because of the fuel, right? So the same thing we did, this is called a framework, a scientific framework, we did with the Triton method. So what we created is thousands and thousands of nearly exactly running the same system, filter-wise and light-wise, or whatever we can do, whatever is possible to make them very similar. And then now our data is very much comparable between these aquariums. So if we have 100 aquariums with high vanadium, or let's say we have 100 aquariums with high vanadium and low chromium, and then there's little differences in some of them, we can still say, oh, okay, so in this case, vanadium and chromium are not harmful, but if you don't run a skimmer, then actually in each of the aquariums that not running the skimmer, let's say 20, everything died. So it's pretty much, maybe this is kind of a problem. Or if you have a lot of aquariums where manganese is visible or detectable when you acidify, and or iron, and you have a lot of them not having it, but they have the same corals, and one group has not having the issues the others have, and everything else is very similar or nearly the same, you can actually understand what these trace elements do to your aquarium, which still we are the only ones doing that, right? So it's just not possible without the framework. So that two things.
Yeah. So before I jump to the viewers' questions, I had one quick question for you guys. And so Ehsan, your tank was awesome. I mean, that clam was just incredible. Somebody also, Algae Warrior, made the same comment about the clam, but obviously chock full of corals.
Algae Warrior is an awesome name.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it.
Very, very apropos.
It's pretty hard to fight with algae, but okay.
We've all been Algae Warriors, right? That comes with the territory. So your tank obviously has a high alkalinity calcium demand, or I guess that tank did have that high demand. And I have a 187 gallon established tank, SPS dominant, that before I switched over to calcium reactor was it needed about 300 mLs per day of the ESV2 part that I was dosing. With that amount of calcium alkalinity demand, can the TRITON method become cost prohibitive?
Yes, because we actually have a version that runs with a calcium reactor.
Ah.
So you can do because we're talking about calcium supplementation. It doesn't really matter which type of calcium you supplement, or alkalinity. It's always alkalinity and calcium. So you can do the TRITON method using the Barling or a 3-part or Harandi home stuff, because that's just calcium and alkalinity. The TRITON method is mostly based on traces and nutrients and stuff like that. So we're looking, further than that. There's like, I'll tell you from a sort of a chemist, there's no difference too much, like not too much difference between a calcium reactor or any other way to supplement calcium and alkalinity. Nothing will be better using calcium and alkalinity dosed by this guy or that guy. Impurities are something that you need to look at, but ICP testing will solve that problem anyway. But anything else, not really matter. So if you're going to run TRITON, you can do that by using a calcium reactor media we give you, because it's very pure, and then you go for the traces you would need for your sump, right? So let me explain, maybe based on the name. Look, if you're running an aquarium, you're losing the most vital, like, let's say the most things you're losing is because of your filter, because your filter is made to filter your aquarium. So it's made for extraction, right? It's not the animals using it up. It's a lot of other chemical things that happen in an aquarium that causes you losing iodine, you're losing iron, you're losing manganese, you're using a lot of, you're losing that stuff. And mostly it's your filter. Saying that, it means that you need to know mostly what your filter needs or what your filter takes away to understand what to replenish every day, right? So you need to have it stable. That means as often you can, you need to replenish what your filter takes away, out of a mistake, maybe. Let's say that, right? So by solving the filter issue, which we did, we have a fixed filter. So you need to stick to this filter. That's the cage, right? You stick to the filter, but we know exactly what this filter needs, right? So we exactly tell you how much carbon to use, how much aluminium-based phosphate remover to use, how much GFO to use. And we know exactly how much stuff these things will take away from your water. So we can replenish them. So we create a baseline in the TRITON method. A baseline, and that's why we call our product the base elements, right? So the base elements are made to create the zero baseline for you to be able to supplement your tank based on your animals, right? So otherwise, you would actually just add stuff, right? And hoping that some of it will actually arrive at your animals. But in this case, you can do that scientifically by zeroing out your filter, and whatever is missing then or is used up then is most likely to be used in your aquarium from your animals or other reactions that metabolic reactions. And that's the way it works, right? So if you want to use the TRITON method right now, in your case, you just use the calcium reactor media, and we'll give you the solution it's called infusion. It's a little bottle
I actually have
that you can add on top. Yeah, and that is actually solving your filter issue. So it's spacing out it's creating your baseline, and whatever you do ICP testing or stuff afterwards, you just add it, and you know that it's gone where it should go.
I was just going to add to that, Ehsan. Sorry, Keith, really quickly. Yeah. I think the core illogical problem that a lot of that, if you think about it, makes the dosing of an aquarium makes no sense is when you think of everyone's aquarium as individual. You don't know what your corals are different to my corals. The size of your colonies is different to mine. So even Ehsan can't tell you what your tank needs. It's really, as he said, with the base filtration, he can know what the filter needs, and everything else is dictated by your tank. And that's where ICP testing allows you to look at what are the deficiencies based on the unique fingerprint of your aquarium.
So,
so that said, just because there was a question of I think it's a pricey question. It's a very practical question you said. But that said, you can run, so you can choose about your calcium supplementation. If not, my tank used up 4 DKH a day. That was 900 mil of Core 7 each day into this aquarium. So it's quite a lot, and I would always, recommend from 3,000 liters upwards to maybe use, if you're not me and can mix that stuff, to maybe use a calcium reactor. It's definitely a more cost-effective version.
Can you use the TRITON infusion with a media that's not TRITON media for the calcium reactor, or do you need to use infusion with the reactor medium from TRITON?
No, you can use it with other media, but you need to test it before, because if it contains impurities, which a lot of them do because they're natural, you actually could be overdosing one of the trace elements. So if they contain iron or manganese, in that case you have an acidic solution in your calcium reactor, so you will dissolve these things, and then they get into your aquarium. You're possibly ending up with some algae. So you can check it. You can just test your reactor media by sending in the output of it, and you can talk to us about it. You can ask us is this okay to use, and we'll tell you.
Cool.
It's no problem at all.
Two little fishies reborn. Any idea in terms of whether that's a good one to use with the infusion, or is that just, do you need to just have it tested?
I think, look, we don't. I've never tested it on my own, and I wouldn't say anything because I really love Julian, the other Julian. I love both Julians. It's very good. But Julian Sprung sent us some stuff a while ago, and he, tried to find out. So I'm pretty sure it should be okay. But I would always test it. The mindset is, best. Don't believe us. You use it. It's an anonymous test. We don't know what you're testing. Just send it in, and you will know for your own, right? And if you have questions, you always can ask. There's no point, right? But I think testing is the best thing going on with that.
So, folks, we have about 50 viewers right now watching us, and we only have 16 likes. So if you're digging what you're watching here, make sure you smash that that like button so more people can find the live stream. All right, so I'm gonna jump into some of these questions, guys. From Macy's Daddy, big fan of your work. When I send in TRITON ICP test, it comes back with only one or two very minor deviations, but suggests water changes over. Why not skip the test and just do water changes?
You could do that, but maybe you don't need to. Actually, you still hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, knowing and acting afterwards is better than just not knowing and doing something, right? So this was the case where people went crazy on me in the beginning, even in Denver, saying I'll do water changes. I'm not against water changes, but I'm against too much non-reasonable work. So I don't like to, do water changes on a 2,500 liter tank every week if I don't need to, And the possibility you have nowadays is you can see if you need to do it or not, right? So if you look at it and you need to do it, we do it, because if you have lead in the tank, get a water change done. But how often do you have lead in the tank? Like, obviously, if you do the TRITON method, you will not have lead in your tank. You will not have arsenic in your tank. So this is not a reason to do a water change. And mostly people think a water change is a good thing. I think it's only a good thing if you use good seawater, and every time you use salt, it's actually not for sure better than how you have in your aquarium right now, because that's live water, which we call live water, and the other one is dead chemical water, right? So for the live water to be worse than that chemical water, a lot of stuff need to have happened, right? So you need to be aware of mixed up fresh seawater is not always the best thing to have, right? And people can do that by testing that water. You can send it in, again, so many people have done that already in the years, and they've found, wow, my salt is maybe not the best to do the water change with, So it's kind of, it's a bit of a complex thing, but to be honest, without an ICP test, you're just running blind.
I'll just add something to that, because I was looking at that question, and it's I think if you're being advised by TRITON as a recommendation to do water changes, then even if it's a small deviation, it must be in something which cannot be removed via an easier alternative,
Yes.
and it is a toxic element that is of concern. So we're only ever recommending a water change if there's not an easier way of achieving removal. And if there's a deficiency, then in most cases, it's just a matter of the advice will be to add the specific element that you're deficient in.
Yeah.
So another question from Planet 3D, and the question is, what is the most common minor element that causes tank issues? Is there something that you guys kind of see a pattern in terms of minor element that is a problematic?
Yeah, we have a lot of, we obviously do a lot of science in that area. Let's say it was because recently it shifted a bit. It's not too much trace elements in the moment. It's more organic carbon in the moment, to be honest. But let's stick to the ICP. For a long time in America and in Europe, it was barium, the main thing that caused issues, still causing issues, because it was added to the strontium supplementation of some people. There is a thing out there, it's called strontium barium complex, and it's based on strontium, assuming that barium, because it's very close to strontium, is needed too. But we found out that this is not really the case, and it's more harmful than any beneficial. So you stick with a strontium that is just strontium, works better. And it's getting better because some of the companies kind of changing that, and strontium is getting purer, but pure strontium is a bit more expensive. So this is one of the things that you see very often. Another one that causes issues is not, it's tin sometimes. Tin is, I think America pretty much, there's some tin around in the moment.
How do you get tin in your water?
And so there's one thing that you can have it in a glass aquarium when you have a fresh aquarium, because the glass producers sometimes use tin on one side of the glass for any producing thing. And if you don't have something to clean it proper, and you have that side inside your aquarium, you will have a lot of tin in the beginning. A lot of artificial rocks, artificial ceramics, artificial things people use, they leach tin over time. This is why we say, go better live rock. That's kind of the thing we recommend. Then you also have tin sometimes because of metal close to the aquarium, not in the water, but even close is sometimes enough to kind of creep. Salt is creeping up and kind of falling into the tank.
Hinges on cabinets.
Yeah, hinges. So we have a lot of things like that listed up. When you do a test with us, and you have something like that, it actually tells you the most likely cases listed up, right? Just right, like from the most likely one first, going low. So you can actually click the box and saying, oh, I don't have any hinges. That's fine. I don't have this. Maybe it's this, right? So this is the way we report our data back to you when you have something like that, and you will find it. But yeah, I think in America there is a lithium problem too, a magnesium lithium problem, but it's not really hurting you guys. I don't see a problem.
Did you say lithium, Ehsan? Yeah,
Yes.
every time I order an ICP
Yes.
test, I get back like sky high lithium, and
Yes.
I wonder if that's a problem. But I've read on the forums that you're not really supposed to worry too much about high lithium levels.
Exactly. We were more concerned in the beginning when I first started testing in America, like years ago, and I have it in one of my talks that say you guys have kind of crazy lithium here, which I've never seen anywhere else in the world. And I think it's linked to the magnesium salts you guys using. It's like say in the beginning nobody knows is it bad or good to have, nowadays we know better, so we have more data, and most aquariums in America have elevated lithium or sky high lithium. Some of them have really high lithium. So every time I check the quality control, I actually check every test that is running over all of our labs, right? So it's always me or my dad, but I will see the last look. I will have the last look at every test, and it's still a lot of high results, like 4,000, 1,000, 2,000. But what's funny is that it seems that this caused a lot of issues for bryopsis. So a lot of people use, a supplement in the past to get rid of bryopsis, which kind of 50-50 works, right? And we found out that this is containing a lot of lithium and highest your lithium amount. And nowadays people use lithium to actually get rid of bryopsis from time to time. So I don't see a problem with that. There's no need for panic if your lithium is high. You can do a water change to get it down. Lithium is a very light, very, very light element. So it's light in weight, right? That means that there is a lot of atoms in your aquarium if you have high lithium, but nothing dies from lithium. I've never seen anything like that. So even not too low, not too high.
So Josh Muldoon has a good question, and he wants to get back into talking about cyano, diatoms, dinos, specifically phosphate and nitrate ratios. And yeah, he's saying that he's guilty of chasing numbers, but that's because in 13 months he has not been able to get rid of his cyano. He's tried 70 to 1, 100 to 1 ratios in terms of the nitrates to phosphate, no change. So he's doing full TRITON method and dry rock. So any thoughts in terms of why he still has the cyano, or any suggestions in terms of that target ratio?
Before he starts, yeah,
dry rock.
Dry rock's not good start. I'm just going to mention, just if we don't get a fully answer Josh's question or anyone else who has questions, the support service for TRITON, which is free, is hello@triton.de. So if we don't get to answer your questions here, because I can see a lot of good questions there, feel free to send us an email, and myself and Ehsan work on that together. So get back to you there.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say it's obvious, but look, the most likely case, and this is why I said it before. In this case, a TRITON method, full TRITON method without live rock, we have seen a lot of these tanks running into cyano problems, right? So, and it's hard to get rid of them because they're not there because of imbalances of ratios, and organic carbon because you don't use organic carbon, right? So that's kind of the thing. What happens then if this cyano is not gone away is people tend to try a lot of things outside the TRITON method, a lot of products, because cyanobacteria are like the thing that you can get people to buy products, right? So there are a lot of products promising cyanobacteria can go away from it. But in this case, if possible, I would just go right away, get me some live rock, put it first in the filter, get some live rock in the display, and just wait and ask this support, write an email, mate, for how much. Give us more data so we can help you better. So don't just run into a shop now and buy 20 kilo and you have a 20-gallon tank. Like, it's not the you know. So you just ask us, but most likely this is the first thing we'll tell you: do this and wait. And I think it will solve the problem on its own.
Do you guys recommend folks when they're starting up a tank that they have some sort of live rock in there and not start 100% dry rock and try to seed it that way?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to just add something. I can see one of the questions asking about ketomorpha and whether Callirpa, but I will address it here because it kind of flows across. The part of the TRITON method is to have the largest piece of live rock possible in your refugium. One, for it gives a point of attachment for some algae. And the important thing is that keto is a good starting point, but as Ehsan can explain, over the 12 or so years his aquarium was running, his algae within his refugium constantly went through different phases. So depending on his aquarium and what's the water chemistry was and what suited best, the algae actually adapted. And the reason it could do that is because the spores were on the live rock there as effectively seeds. So he didn't have to add different algae. They just came naturally out of that live rock. So I think it's a very important part of the system.
Yeah. So, yes. Yeah. So sorry, but the what was the question before? It was I just missed that. So there was the algae one. And Keith asked something before because I wanted to say something and just
we're going all over the place, or we're all over the board.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
Well, let me try to. Well, let me ask another question. Maybe we'll get back around to where we were before. But is a refugium like the best way to do the TRITON method? I have a Bellum ARID algae reactor, and so I've been using that on my tanks. I first started using it with my 187-gallon tank. I'm now using it in my 225-gallon tank. Or is the refugium ideally better versus an algae reactor? Because an algae reactor is not necessarily a refugium. But so what are your thoughts in terms of the different ways that you can utilize macro for the TRITON method? You've got a refugium, you got algae scrubbers, you've got algae reactors. Is there one of those methods that works best with TRITON?
Well, that's not difficult to answer. The reality is it's depending on what you want to reach, right? So you want to reach an aquarium like my aquarium, then you definitely stick to everything we say exactly the way we say it, and that's the algae. That's a refugium. Right, and the reason for that, and behind the way we work, is always a reason, right? The reason for that is the ability of the algae to adapt to your water. Algae is similar to the plants we have in the garden. Okay, all of them need specific things in the soil. Like you have this plant, you put a bit of fertilizer for the plant. You can buy them in the garden center, right? So you can buy them in the wherever in the shop, but they're different for different plants, okay? And they're even different for making them bloom or, create flowers or even color the flowers. So if you understand that, it means that soil dictates which plant will grow on it, right? This is the reality. So the soil in our case is the water, means that if you have changing water parameters, nutrient-wise, then also another algae will grow in your sump. and you will. This is what Julian explained. You can't dictate the algae. The algae will be dictated by your water. So you need to have this thing growing in the time it needs to grow. So if you change your aquarium, you go for a group of antias, you definitely will feed more, and that causes your water levels to change, which then causes your algae to adapt. So maybe your Chaeto will go down, and Rastomosa, like Colaper, will grow then and take over in a dominant way. And that's what you want, because you want biological adaptation. That's a biological adapting filter. In the case of a reactor or algae turf scrubber, you're a bit, kind of limiting this. This ability is not there. Colaper in a Pax Bellum is maybe possible. I don't know, but it's kind of not that good. Like you would have a Cheetomorpha in there. And that's just the reason why, it for a really high level, it would be we'll prefer still a controllable refugium, because there's a lot of more stuff growing there, and you can use different light. Again, like light is important for algae too. You can't limit the light, because then you would limit the type of algae too. So that's the reality behind it. Doesn't mean it's not working. So for a lot of people, because they don't want to reach a 1 meter clam or 1 meter, corals in their aquarium, it's all right, So that's kind of, but you can step up, you can do things about it. If you think you're happy with this, you start with it and you look if it works. And still there are other possibilities. I mean, it's still adapting, but you're not adapting all of the tank. You just have a little thing that you change, and then you kind of go that way. And we have a lot of people with algae turf scrubbers happy with the tank. It's okay.
So it's basically you have more variety, you have more different types of algae. So there's different options in terms of the adaptability of that, in terms of the algae you have in a infusion versus a reactor or a scrubber. Okay.
There's one thing more. You have also more biodiversity, little animal wise. There is a bit of more. But it needs more space. So it's not like this or that. If you don't have the space, you go with the algae with the Pax Bellum, because that's space saver and it works. So you go there. If you have it, if you have to choose and you want to go high end, you use the Refugium.
So if somebody's doing the TRITON method, right, and let's say they've got the cyano, and let's say that their nitrates and phosphates are testing out at 0, is the cyano essentially absorbing all the nitrate and the phosphate and kind of giving you false readings? What do you guys recommend if somebody's got an algae problem, 0 nitrates and phosphates? Should they be dosing nitrates and phosphates? Should they be increasing the lighting period for the refugium or the algae reactor? What do you guys typically advise when people are in those have that kind of scenario going there?
To Keith, to really help people, you kind of need to go case by case. That's not just we never go generically, because that's not TRITON. That's not what people expect. We did all this stuff to not go generic, right? So if people have questions, they come up like the guy that asked before with his rock, it is dry rock. It doesn't matter what his nitrogen and phosphate says in that moment. It's a biological reason most likely. So we tell him to use that. If we don't have that information and just have nitrogen and phosphate, we actually don't say too much, because that's not enough. It won't help. It could make it worse. Like you say, it's either it's taken everything, or it's there because there's no competition. So it's both ways as possible. It's 50-50. You add it, you end up with more, or you end up with none. It's just not. This is this is not scientific. This is kind of So what we do is we would ask for them to come back to us, ask us. We ask more questions, and then we decide which one is more likely in that case. And mostly we're right, and it happens, and people are happy. If not, we actually go the next step, ask more questions, try to figure out what's happening.
a really good base point, Keith. Sorry, just really quickly to add in. I think to give professional advice, I need to be providing professional advice on professional values. So that's where we do ask, you know, an ICP to be performed. Yep. An NDOC is also the other side of things. So with that information and the ability to question through, I'm generally pretty confident we can sort out people's problems.
All right, so here's a tough question from Aquarismo de Resultado. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Why every time that people send 3 samples of the same water to ICP, the results are completely different? Looks like the ICP test has a huge standard deviation for trace elements, says it's not reliable. What I'm not sure if this person's talking about Triton or not, but what would you say to that? Those comments?
I think they're saying, I think they're talking about setting up 3 different ICP testing companies, and I'll let Ehsan answer that one. But I think that's where they're coming from.
Right.
Yeah. So look, an ICP is just a machine, right? A lot of people don't really understand that. If you buy an ICP machine, you buy a machine that can test everything. It can test soil, it can test water, it can test, you could, oil and honey and milk. So whatever you want, it can test, but it can't do it just on its own. So you need to actually, as the person that bought the ICP machine, you need to create a method of testing. That's what it's called, and that's actually the same case for everything else analytical too, right? So you create a method of testing, and that method you create based on what you want to test or what you want to know in that. So in the case of seawater, I have done that, right? Because that's why it took so long for everybody else to buy ICP machine and do the same thing. So it was said that it is impossible to test seawater with an ICP machine. And I proved that wrong, right? So I tested seawater with an ICP machine. A lot of people back then against it, which is all right because they were skeptic and they don't want to have snake oils, and I accept that. But I went all the way and I did my method, and the method works, and it's made fitting the purpose of running an aquarium, right? The problem is I'm not sharing this IP. I'm not sharing this method, right? We actually produce a machine going with the ICP machine to be able to test seawater, right? That's not, you can't buy this machine. We build it in Germany, right? So if you understand that, wherever you send your test results to, they will have other methods. They will have other methods, their own, maybe somebody did them for them, or they have done it on their own. But there's so many things you can do to this sample. You can acidify it, you can do a million things, that you prepare the sample, or you can split them up, you can run it fast, run it slow, test it 10 times, test it 5 times. It's so many things you can adjust, and maybe I make a video once to explain that. But based on this method, the test results will be different or not. So we have actually some companies, they're very close, to what we get. And some companies, they're very far away, and it's also time depending. It's also depending of if the method is capable to test over a test sample that is long-term in transit. It's a lot of things that you need to kind of have done. If you do it with us, a lot of people have done that. They send several samples to us, right? And run them through the machine and get the samples. Over the 12 years, millions and millions have done that. It's really a lot of people have done that because, I'm fine with that. This is a good way to do it. Even Richard Ross has done that, right? Like all in the beginning, and he went very negative, but it's okay. He's a skeptical person and he tries to save people from bullshit. So I'm sorry to say that, but this is the reality. He's not a bad guy. He tries to save his community for the running into problems, and he's done that. And you can see in his results that they are very close to each other, very precise. So that's a whole different thing, and you can dive into it. But the reality is, you will never find out. You will never find out what is the right result, right? But you can find out which one is working for Aquarist. And the truth is, Triton works for Aquarist, and that's why we changed the whole aquarium industry to use ICP machines, right? So in this case, I think, again, he can come to us, he can send us email, we answer him. We'll show him data from the system where things have been detected in his water. There's no problem with that, right? And we do redo his test results if he wants, because we always have a spare sample. There's no point, you know, I mean, we don't have anything to hide. If this wouldn't work, it wouldn't work for so many people. We have 37,000 people testing with us right now, you know, so just look at his case. Again, there will be a problem. Maybe he's talking about other companies, whatever. But yeah,
are you guys the biggest right now? Do you have any idea in terms of are you guys have the most you know, customers in terms of tanks being tested?
Yeah,
by far.
Yeah. By far.
And we're the only one with 4 labs around the world, spreading into different countries. If we get a chance, I'd like to see that answer that one about the reliability and how we calibrate.
Go for it.
So if we get a chance to do that one, let's hit that one.
Oh.
Yeah,
take it, Julian.
Ehsan, do you want to talk about calibration, or I can explain a little? Or let you talk about it, Ehsan. You run the machine.
Yeah. Is there any specific thing he's asking for? Or?
He just said how is the machine calibrated, and if we check our calibration before and after running tank water samples.
Yeah, so what we do is we don't only check the calibration before and after. We actually check it in between. That's something that we do from the beginning. Yeah, so we test every batch, every third or fourth test, normally depends on the machine we're running them on, is tested a standard sample. So it's a known sample we test, right? Seawater. So it's natural seawater in that case. And there is a test at the end, which is artificial seawater. So we look at, you know, the reality of what we're testing is correct. At the end of that, we take the samples and we look at all these samples. If there's any sample not correct, and there's a reason for it, like there's kind of millions of reasons that can be, one of them can be wrong. Normally it's not. And if it's not, we upload the results, right? So this is the way we do it. This is our quality control. In an ICP with seawater, it's very important not to test it at the end and the beginning, because there will be most likely a difference at the end after 50 results for sure. You know, like this is kind of really impossible. But you need to be aware of in between too. So there are a lot of different kinds of errors. One of them is a machine error. It's a kind of standard error. So it's an error that occurs because the machine is maybe too cold or too warm. These errors are not bad errors because they're on each sample the same. So they can be recalculated. So you have 200 minus 200 sodium on each test, right? So you can recalculate that and say, okay, so add 200, the machine will do that on its own. But there are other errors. There are fluctuation errors. So if you have a fluctuating error, you can't see that. You will not be able to see this. And for that, you need to have as many as possible tests in between to be able to see, oh, I had this run, I had a fluctuation error, I can't upload these results. It's happening. And that's also why we sometimes have 1 day delay, because then we redo the samples. We have a spare sample always, so we only need one of the samples that you send us. But if there's any issue, we use the second sample, right? And sometimes it happens that one of them is broken and a run is not quality is not good enough, so I'll reject the upload. I'm not going to upload, and then I can't test the second test because there is none, and then we request a new one or we give you a new test. So because we're testing like over 2,000, 3,000 tests a month, it's quite a lot. You need to have this.
Deep Reef asked a good question. This is going to be a question I was going to ask you guys too, but does the amount of time that the water is in the mail impact results? Does that impact reliability?
Not reliability, but it's impacting the result a bit, not too much. It's low. As long as it takes, as more it can happen. It's depending on the element we're talking about, like tin, for example, or mercury. They are very gluey elements. They will glue on the side of the vial, and then you're possibly not picking them up. With the main elements, normally nothing happens. But what is bad to the travel time, and what is why we put machines into America, like in the countries, and try to run them there, is the time, the change in your aquarium. So as closer you are with the snapshot, as better. Because, I mean, in the case of emergency for sure, but even if not, 10 days means that you have a picture of your aquarium 10 days earlier, like in the past. And that's not good. That's kind of, it's better to have it closer by. That's
Are you guys planning? So you have a lab on the west coast of the U.S. and Los Angeles. Any plans for a lab on the East Coast, or is that not in the cards?
We're not allowed to
Not
talk
allowed
about
to
it.
talk about it. I'll strike that question then. Hammy's Reef has a question about where do you guys recommend keeping nutrient levels at in terms of phosphate and nitrates at? I guess that would be for the TRITON method.
Habitat based. Julian, you wanted to go with that?
Yeah, I think that brings up, I guess, the latest development in our programming, which Ehsan put a lot of work into last year. And that was, it's based on, again, I suppose, an understanding that I have as a former coral collector and working in the industry. Where we go and collect the corals really is dependent the habitat that we visit. So a lot of the LPS and some of the more famous Australian corals like Scolymia and Homophilia, I think they're called now, and Acanthastria are actually collected right on the coast. Very turbid water, nutrient levels vary, salinity changes. Yeah, euphyllias, a lot of the most kind of gold torch and those really incredible euphyllias you see come out of Australia, they also are collected in these habitats, as opposed to where the strawberry shortcakes and some of the the higher, more demanding SPS corals are collected, which are out on the outer barriers and some of these very stable, pristine water. So it's not uncommon when you obviously visit aquariums and look at different people's tanks to see those corals, sitting within a foot of each other in an aquarium when sharing a common water chemistry, when on that habitats they come from is very unique and very different. So in those situations, someone's not kind of in their ideal situation or habitat. So the habitat upgrade that was put through last year with TRITON really gives you an opportunity to dictate what the predominant style of your aquarium is. Is it a mixed reef? Is it what we call an outer barrier SPS, which is the most demanding, or is it a soft coral, a tank, which can handle these variety of different levels? So, again, what is ideal in nutrient, that really depends on what coral are being kept. And again, you can always go high end and say, I'm just going to keep it an SPS, as it was in the past. For all TRITON recommendations were based on, if you want to keep the really hard high end SPS, you need to maintain it at this level. And then you just may need to feed some of those kind of other corals a bit more and give them a bit more boost nutrient-wise. Whereas now we have the option, people can choose where their tanks are, and it will alter the set points accordingly.
So SPS dominant tank, nitrates, phosphates, what typically natural seawater, or is that targets that you guys recommend for those?
Funny is natural seawater is
very low.
Deviating. Yeah, no, it's deviating.
Okay.
It's not always the same. So like I say, it's habitat based. So the outer reef ones, strawberry shortcakes, super whatever, Disney Walt, whatever, Walt Disney thing, whatever you call
crazy
it.
tenuous.
All this, yeah, exactly. 10 years is even. I've seen 10 years grown like in dirty. But anyway, so whatever fancy super corals, I would go low. Because it's pretty much nothing there. Like when I tested Lyle brought water back, Lyle, the owner of Cairns Marine, once, and he had a talk about it on Magna in Washington, and I tested that water 12 times because there was nothing in there.
Really?
Nothing. It was, I couldn't believe it. I thought it's wrong. Like the guy that asking is kind of, I thought it's wrong. I barely got one rating out of phosphate, so it's low. It's not always low though, because this is the job we do here. This is the science we do here. It's depending when you go, what tide you're in. Is the water coming out or going in? There's a lot of things that you need to understand. It couldn't be zero for a while, but then it could be higher the rest of the day. So it's a 4D measurement when we do this. Like, it's hard because it's not you go one spot and you have it. You need to stay there every hour and see what's happening in the hours, so hard. But to be honest, low. Go 6p, so 6 phosphorus, 0.018, 0.02 phosphate. Would be good coloration, healthy coral, low stress level for them, and maybe a nitrate level like 0.4 would be something around 2-ish, would be 2 milligram would be okay, but nitrogen would be needed to be tested to be dangerous too.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my tank, I was getting a little bit some cyano in my tank, so my nitrates were like around 2.5, maybe 5. Phosphates 0.06, 0.07, something of that nature. So I cut back the feeding in terms of the coral feeding and some of the fish food, and I really just made it very buttoned up in terms of just making sure that the water was clean in terms of what I was putting in for food and all that stuff. And my nitrates and phosphates got down to near zero, after a few weeks. And my, some of my SPS got pissed off. They started fading out and losing coloration. So, I think there's just so many different factors in play that, can cause those kind of issues. But I've seen some kick-ass tanks that, have very, very low nitrates and phosphates.
Hey, it's not. You need to understand one thing about nitrate phosphate, and there is a scientific paper about it that I really like. Look, low. No, oh, hey, you hear that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I just lost it. So low nitrates and phosphates are not good. It could be bad. Could be bad, right? So it's kind of a curve saying, okay, here, but then you go up and it's kind of in a good level. So you need a bit, but not too much, right? But as you go higher, something else will happen, because in that area of no to low, there is no competition. You need to think about that. There is no passive pressure. That's what the passive problems, they call it in that paper. So there's no pressure on the coral reef. There's no algae growing because it's too low for algae. There's nothing kind of, stressing the coral. But if you go higher, it's not bad for a coral. They will just turn brown possibly,
Right.
because they get more sustainability. They get fat. This is what I call, a brown coral is really healthy, good, and maybe too much, right? But then you get passive problems. They get stress of other factors, right? Because that's not the environment they live in. So you need to have that in mind when you're keeping corals. You're not only keeping the coral itself. It's not about feeding the coral or just thinking of the coral. You need to think about where the coral lives. You keep the environment they live in that, right? And that's something you also have in mind. And then you decide what you do with your nutrients. It's very hard. It was very hard for me. I did a lot of work into that field because of the NDOC system, and there's a lot of organic carbon involved here too. But like I say, you don't go focused what's good for my coral. Go focused what's good for the whole tank, because you're caring for that water in that tank. That's what it is, right?
Just to add, if anyone wants some information about the the NCP ratio and the work that Ehsan did into that field, again, email me at hello@triton.de. I can forward you that paper. It gives a lot of information about all the different pathways for nitrogen and how they activate within an aquarium. So there's a lot of information there, and we freely give that out to whoever is interested to read it.
So 321 Reefer is asking a question about Kalkwasser and pH, and we've been talking a lot about it on this show, and I know others have as well, in terms of the importance of pH and to the success of a reef tank. But the question, this person's question in terms of Kalkwasser, first of all, do you guys have a have Kalkwasser that you sell and have tested? Is it pure, or is that something that you?
We have tested several ones. People have sent them in and asked for us to test it, and we did it. Kalkwasser is not that bad though. You know, it's a chemical that can be very pure. It's very easy to produce. If you just buy, you know, calcium hydroxide somewhere, pharmaceutical quality, food grade, maybe in America, still food grade, very high grade in America. So you can still buy that. I don't see any problem with that. And yeah, working wise, it's, you know, there are two ways. You have two ways to deliver calcium and alkalinity into an aquarium. One is more based on high pH and one is based on low pH. So you Keith, running a low pH version. So your pH need to be pushed up. You know, that's what your job is, to kind of control not going too low, because you add an acid to your tank, like carbonic acid. It's CO2, right? And when you're doing Kalkwasser, you actually do the opposite. So you're adding OH. You need CO2 in that case to create alkalinity. Both systems have downsides and pros. So there's 50-50. Best thing is actually running both together. You actually take the one downside and put it. So yeah, it's really not much more. It's a very simple system for me. It's you can see that it's a very easy way to do it. And it's a lot of people do it. It's pretty good.
Is there a target pH that you guys recommend for the TRITON method, or again, does it kind of depend on a case by case basis in terms of what a person's doing? You know, and if what would be kind of like that target range that you guys would like to recommend for a pH?
Look, coral wise, is different to fish wise. So coral wise, you know, sometimes for some corals it's very hard to say, but for some corals is a low pH is not that bad. A lower one, not 6 for sure, but you know, like something about 7.9, 7.8. It's the corals that can handle a calcium reactor very well. They can handle a barling style of tank very well. They got an extra CO2 that kind of they like, you know, that's not too bad for them. There are other corals that don't like that. Some fish, especially antias, we're realizing that they like high pH more. Could be caused by they don't like too much CO2. Not sure about that yet. But they seem to be more active. They seem to be eating more. Very hard, kept very difficult antias. The TRITON method is running a more pH high solution based on the chemicals we use. So we're between 8.1 and 8.3. Most of the coral like that. Some of the bacteria don't like it, but you can handle that. And a lot of fish love it. So healthy fish kind of is really good for a healthy reef tank too, you know? So it really depends. Going TRITON method without fish is a bit harder. It's really more difficult than it should be, you know? So just to let you know, we are people that like nature, and in nature there's a lot of fish around your coral, and that's the reality.
I like having a lot of fish. I think fish poop is good for corals. I don't have any proof, but
clam poop really good for coral too. Clam poop also.
Clam poop, huh? Yeah, where do you get a clam that big? I don't know what's going on with clams these days, because years ago I was able to keep clams with no problem, but the last few years I haven't tried a clam in a few years, man. I just cannot keep clams for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's me.
Oh, we can find out.
Oh yeah, we could send a clam in for testing.
If you want. No, you can. We can just tell me your number and just write an email to hello@TRITON.
So Johnny has a question here. Do you see anything wrong with using a two-part such as ESV, then dosing TRITON trace per ICP test? The one element that scares me is nickel. Haven't dosed that yet.
Yeah. No, there's no problem. He can do that. It's actually, you know, just beneficial. He's adding some knowledge into his system, but it's better than just dosing something. So absolutely okay. if he knows what's a nickel is good for softies. So if he's having a lot of softies, he can do that. If not, like out of my experience, it's okay. He can test it, but if it's not really doing anything to his tank, then just leave it away, because it's also in an overdose, it's pretty harmful. So this element is just to be used if they're really useful for you. So in the case of softies, I think that's pretty good. If not, just try it maybe, and then if nothing happens, leave it away.
So Hamy's Reef has a question. Do you run blanks in between samples to ensure that one sample is not contaminating another within the spray chamber?
Yes, we do. Okay. We actually we run several times. We have a special introduction system. So the introduction system can clean itself, and it does. Every time we do a test, it cleans itself beforehand. It's very hard. I can't tell you too much about it, but this guy seems to understand what I'm talking about. And we don't have any spread of any element further on. But in quality control, I still check that. If you have really high amounts of tin or mercury, because they're gluey, they can still, even after cleaning and whatever happens always in between every test, they can still spread to the other one. But it's visible because it needs to be a special amount in the test before. So, and that's a lot of stuff, right? So we have that sometimes in aquariums like, the sea, like the Sea Worlds and like the big aquariums, and sometimes have crazy things in their water. And then we take care of that. But in hobbies aquariums, everything would be dead if that amounts appear. So it's not really a problem. It's the standard problem to solve. Yeah.
I think from some of the explanations Ehsan's given, it gives, we use this analogy that you can have an oven, but that doesn't make you a Michelin star chef. And this is part of the skill that, a proper analysis, and not the machine is part of the equation, but it's having an accurate brain, a knowledgeable brain, looking at that data and making sure that it's correct before it goes out and is uploaded. So that's probably what you're paying for, really, with your ICP testing.
Yeah, and again, if there's something, again, we have a spare sample. So if there's something, and it was always the case, like we're doing it for years and years like that. If there is something that you would say, I don't believe that couldn't be wrong. It could really be maybe a contamination of that one sample. Understand, we're not testing your water in your aquarium. We don't do that. We test the water in that vial. Right. So whatever happens to this vial, and people come to us and say, hey, could I have another one? Because I kind of don't lose anything, and it's showing 3,000 copper. Yeah, well, it definitely is something wrong, right? So we test the other sample and then give you that data, and it's fine. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's not. So it's always good to ask. We don't have that sample for nothing in there. It's just not because somebody breaks it. It's more for security if something could be wrong. Before you do something to your tank, very serious, ask us. No problem.
I'll just add to that because we do. Sorry, Keith, just because it's very important that when we do get people questioning, they've got concerns with their results. The first thing I do is I contact Ehsan, the lab, and ask that we review the actual first sample, see if there's anything that stands out strange from that. Through that, it's the quality control procedure. We just check that is correct and there's nothing anomalous there. And if there is an issue, then we go to the next step, which is we look for the backup sample and we test it from there. But yeah, people ask all the time for a review of their results, and we're happy to oblige.
An audit, huh? You get requests for an audit there, huh? All the time. This can't be right.
People don't like to get the truth sometimes, but unfortunately, yeah, sometimes you do have problems with your water.
So I saw this question in the chat earlier, and I wanted to ask the question in terms of the frequency of testing. So what do you guys recommend in terms of how often you should do ICP tests? I think a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, people order ICP tests when something seems off in the tank, right? But I also think it's a great idea to order an ICP test when you're tank is looking great, because that kind of gives you a baseline in terms of success. So what do you guys recommend frequency of ICP testing? You know, and obviously it costs a lot of money to run tests each time, but
Yeah.
you know, what's a reasonable amount of tests per year?
So yeah, so just looking from the side of how you run a tank, I would say if you run in the TRITON method, we try to reduce errors. So, you know, you're using all our products. It's very unlikely you have heavy metals in your tank, you know, because you we know what you add, and our products are run through the ICP anyway. So in the case of TRITON method, you run in it every 3 months. That's way enough, you know. And that counts for every kind of size of tank. It's payable, you know, it's affordable. That's okay, and it's secure, right? If you're a very experimental guy, like I know a lot of my friends, they're crazy scientists, so you know their hobbies are, they're not doing it for the corals, they're doing it for whatever. They're just experimental guys, so they do a lot of things to the tank, right? And things that we call the dominator, for example, right? So they build things, and they're crazy, right? And if you're a guy like that, maybe test your water a bit more often, maybe every month, because you kind of, you know, you're running risk, right? So you do that. The same counts for really big aquariums. So big aquariums, you know, the money you takes for doing a test, compared to what you would have by a loss, is if something dies, is absolutely good to test it every month. You know, it's not making sense every week. David Sexby is testing every week because he's a very old school and very good reefer. I know him, but he's having a really big tank, 6,000 liters at home. But it's not really needed. Every 2 weeks would be okay. Every 1 month is okay in my eyes, and that's fine. You know, if something is off, you always can do it. But when you're looking at very little aquariums, not running the TRITON method, it's hard, because you kind of spending the same money on that little 25 gallon aquarium like you would, you know, do on a 6,000 liter one, right? So yeah, it's a bit of, then I would say 3 months is still okay, but don't experiment that much. That's just like,
If
you know,
if you're adding aminos or carbon dosing to remove nitrates and to reduce nitrates, then you really need to be doing an NDOC, I believe, because effectively you're blind dosing without doing an NDOC test. So that, again, if you're running aminos and you're running organic carbon dosing, then you need to be doing an NDOC every probably 3 months. And if you haven't done one before, get out there and do one, because you really don't know where those levels are.
Can an aquarist have too much information? I mean, I know you guys, you know, provide, you know, just a lot of granular details in terms of, you know, an aquarium, in terms of all the different elements that you guys measure. But can there be too much information? Can an aquarist be too reactive? You know, what do you guys recommend in terms of, if you see results for one test versus another, like a month apart? You know, do you kind of just advise, you know, hang in there, let's kind of see what the next month holds, you know, or you know, I'm sure this varies depending on the tank, but what's your kind of general, you know, position in terms of the amount of information and the amount of, you know, the numbers that people should really react based on, you know, data. It's just, I'm always like, try to keep things simple and try not to overreact. I try to be very patient, and you know, if you course correct too often, then I think it can kind of spiral out of control.
Can I just jump in there, Ehsan, quickly, and let you fill it out? I think that it can be as in depth or as shallow as you want. Some people don't want to know about water chemistry. Some people just want to look at their coral and their fish. If you are that type of person, then get your ICP test, run down the colors, the bars, and just see that everything's, you know, in the green. If something's trending into the yellow, then watch it. Depending on what it is, follow the recommendations. That's all you need to know. If you want to go in and, you know, chasing numbers, I agree, is not always the best, but some people they enjoy dialing everything in to a minuscule level. So that's up to the reefer. That's what I see.
Yeah, Keith, the problem is that we're doing science. We're doing science on aquariums. We're doing science on seawater, but we also do science on aquarists, right? So there's a reason for a lot of things. It's very funny. A lot of funny stories there, because we are aquarists. I'm an aquarist, right? I'm a long-time aquarist. Julian is an aquarist. I'm missing my tank right now, so we're building a new one. But the reality is that, yeah, there are different types of people out there. And I think there is an issue in the moment that people see the modern reef keeping still too much like the old school reef keeping. And I'm not saying old school reef keeping as an offense. I'm an old school reef keeper. I'm a very old school reef keeper. I am. But I use very modern machines, right? And that said, it's kind of, I want to kind of tell you that, you know, you're not doing an ICP test to look at your calcium. You're really not. You know, well, I'm using that as a guideline to use my own calcium tests, you know, at home, to kind of dial them in, you know, to know where I'm really at, right? It's another method, so it's kind of helping to see where you really are. If something is there, an ICP test is 70% made for error correction. That means that you're doing something and you don't know about it, right? So if something like that happens, react. If there is lead in your water, react, right? Because that's causing your corals at one point to die. And I created ICP testing exactly for that reason. What was my problem was I'm sitting there, I'm trying to avoid all mistakes. And in the third tank and the fifth tank, you know, like it is always this case. Like the first tanks always crash sometimes. Second tank crash again, you know, like, and then the third one goes right for 4 years, you know, and that was a problem for me. I don't like that. So the situation is common everywhere. Everybody has that. And then this coral start dying, and you know you did something wrong. That's not right. We are out of that. Reef keeping is not like that anymore, right? So you do an ICP test is actually in between. I did the error and my coral died. It's exactly in between that. So you see it coming, right? You see copper on 10, nothing is bleached. Copper on 24, start bleaching, right? Copper on 35, start dying. That's kind of the thing that you see now, right? And you couldn't see before. So reaction should be based on rational, you know, a rational decision based on your results. If you want to go through them and you understand them, you think you understand them, it's fine. If not, come to us, right? The problem with the old school and modern reef keeping clash is that people think if I go to a forum or to Facebook and ask, look at my results, somebody will know what to do. But it's too early for that. Right? In the past, I'm absolutely with you. Calcium, magnesium, KH, phosphate, nitrate. There's enough knowledge out there that can help you. But right now, you go onto Facebook and ask for vanadium. I sometimes look at the answers and I cry. It's just too hard. You know, it's just made up stuff, right? And there's not enough knowledge out there that can help you right now. So the best thing is always ask the person that did the test, ask the person that you think that would know, right? And that's very hard. I don't want to put us in like really high there, but we have done 13 years of testing seawater. We are professionals in there. We have really professional people here that know about the things, and we don't panic, right? And we don't make you panic. So just calm down. If you have a question, write an email. Just an email. That's easy. Just, hey, I have a red one. It's lead. Should I really do what you guys say? And we say it. We tell you right away after the test. It's in your results. Do a water change right away. It's red, right? Do it. And if not, then you can ask. If you're in yellow, ask us.
So here's an interesting question from Reef and Dive. Mr. Ehsan, don't you consider it would be useful to stratify trustful versus less trustful results? I mean, low potassium means a lot, while low vanadium means near nothing. What are your thoughts on that?
We kind of do that. So everything that is green is for us. It's all right. Like that doesn't matter. Nothing.
So that's already baked in.
Yeah, it's in there. So you when you look at the results, like maybe communication-wise, it's not kind of kicking in with everybody. But let me explain that. You're looking at our results. We have red zones, yellow zones, green zones, right? So for vanadium, for example, even 0 vanadium is still green zone. That means that nothing will happen if you have low vanadium, right? Exactly the same counts for nickel, exactly the same counts for cobalt, exactly the same counts for chromium. While the red zone of these elements will be on the other side. So if you have too high chromium, we will warn you until you do a water change. Same counts for cobalt, same counts for vanadium. The other side is calcium. Calcium has a red side on low amounts. So if you go too low calcium, the machine will tell you, hey, be aware, that's a life important for the living animals in your aquarium. You need to replenish that, right? So it's already in there, and it's actually written and in color. So we try to be good enough in communication for everybody, but it's automatic in there when you get your results.
So I want to be mindful of your time. I think we'll field one more question and then we'll wrap it up. So Hammy's Reef is asking, can you ask them if they know about? Have you guys heard of Reef Moonshiner? That method in terms of trace elements, and if you have heard of that, what's the biggest difference between what you guys do in terms of TRITON with trace elements versus the Reef Moonshiner method? Have you guys heard of that?
Yes, we heard about that. It's very much the same thing like a lot of people do in the world now, selling little bottles that go with an ICP test of us or of other companies, whatever. There's two main things. A trace element is not just something in a bottle that you can buy. So you need to actually mix this stuff, right? So we produce it. We produce the bottles, and some of them need to be chelated. So they need to be carried by another molecule to be usable for your aquarium, right? And that molecule is not easy to understand, to measure or something. So this is also part of our IP. It means that you don't have just vanadium in that bottle. You possibly have vanadium 1, 2, 3, 4. Like there are different types of vanadium, and there are different salts of vanadium. And then you have, for example, vanadium chelated or not, to be able to carry into the coral or stay in your tank like it is or not, right? And you need to understand that. So all these bottles are not the same. It works the same way, possibly. So you add it. From the logic, it's absolutely okay for me. But people think it's the same in the bottle, and that's not true, right? It's different, and I don't know. I've not tested his stuff or that company's stuff, but I can't imagine that somebody can copy ours right exactly the same. That's one thing. The other thing is that there is, in my mind, that's no method. So a method always describes something a way to, right? So the TRITON method is very different to just doing testing and adding stuff. The TRITON method we explained is a framework. There's a lot behind that. It's a very deep thing, and there's no copy of that anywhere in the world. So it's kind of, playing with words is always a bit hard. So, it's a kind of a TRITON method and then this other method, right? But it's absolutely not the same thing. And people need to realize that. But yeah, otherwise it's up on trust. So if people trust that company, there's a reason for it, do it.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
All right, one last question we're going to sneak in here, and this was a good question to end on. Does 321 Reefer, does TRITON have anything new coming out this year, or I guess in the next few years that you guys kind of talk about at this point, or anything in the pipeline?
Okay, wait, 2 questions, right? Yes, like every year, something new coming out, and 2, no, because we will get copied right away. No, we're not. No, joking. But no, we obviously don't want to get people too excited, and then in the moment there's so much stuff happening in the world that could inhibit us to be fast. So we don't want to get them too excited. But yeah, for sure, we're innovating things. Go.
I want to add to that. This man, I've worked with him now for almost 2 years, and I can tell you one thing: he is a mad scientist, a mad aquarist scientist. He never stops thinking, and he's always thinking a year or 2 ahead. Sometimes I've got to slow him down, pull him back, and say, let's just do the things that we've already decided upon, and we'll get there. But his brain doesn't stop working. And the other thing is that we this year we're really embarking upon information, getting information out about how Triton system works, doing videos, doing more live stream Q&A sessions like you've been awesome enough to organise for us. Get the information out there, explain things to people, get the content is the key to 2021. So you're going to see, a lot more of these type of things, a lot more information, a lot of videos, explanations about our products, how they work, how our testing service works. And I hope that helps people to be more successful.
Cool. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Any final words here? This has been awesome. Really, really appreciate this. I know the folks out there are digging this. Just a lot of questions coming through. Any final thoughts?
Can we do it again?
Yeah, for sure.
Can we do it again, Keith?
Yeah, for sure.
It's so good. It's so good in the
week,
morning. It's
next
awesome.
week or the week after.
I'm game if you guys are game.
Bring it on, mate.
Good. Yeah, let's see what the comments say, and then we do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
And have fun with that.
So is it the weekend there yet?
No, it's Friday.
All right, I'm jumping way ahead.
Yeah, so we still need
couple more
hours. I'm psyched, man.
Before I crack a
I'm
deal.
psyched, man. This was awesome. You're my first time 2 guests, and you guys are international. So broke some new ground here with this an innovative live stream with an innovative couple of guests from an innovative company. There we go.
Well, yes, that sounds good.
Anyway, well, that'll do it for this show.
Thanks,
and again, I just want to really thank you guys so much for taking the time. I know you're super, super busy, but we'll definitely do this again. And I also want to thank Marine Depot for being the sponsor and supporting the show. Please keep them in mind when you're shopping for your reef tank. My next live stream will be on Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Tulio from Reef Bright. Had Tulio on before. It's always an interesting conversation with Tulio, so please tune in. Should be another great show. So until then, be safe out there, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Keith.